This is for everybody on the panel. What is your favorite thing to do in the outdoors?
Mine's easy. I love camping because I feel like I get so much when I go. I can camp, I can look at stars, I can hike, I can swim because I was doing the river ones, where the parks have the river. There's so much to do when you're camping, right? So, and sports. So yeah, I love camping.
My favorite thing. I really like to read outside. I think probably the most happiest time I had recently, I was unemployed, and so it was great because I got to most days just go out and hammock at different parts of the Greenbelt and just read. That was part of my favorite.
All right. My favorite thing is the kayak. The reason why I love kayaking is because it's so liberating, and when you're on the water, it's at this moment where you actually become as one and with nature, and it just makes you feel like as if you're, this small little ant in this big massive lake. Especially when it's not too busy on Town Lake, because Town Lake can be like I-35 sometimes.
Okay, so I gave myself the self-proclaimed title of like the Black Bear Grylls. So it's a real laugh. But so basically anything that's outdoors that's like you gotta go like rough it and stick it, like I love it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like pack what you can carry type of deal. Not ultralight because I like to stay more comfortable. But other than that, I love the outdoors. I mean, really, just throw me anywhere. I mean, I take meetings outside. And people are like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, I was one of like the COVID kids in like Zoom University. So like all my school classes were like in my front yard at like this little table that I bought. I'm like, are you outside? I'm like, yeah. Or are you outside? So that's what I'd like to do outside.
So, next question, and I'm going to preface this a little bit. So, one of the things we know, historically, all people were engaged in the outdoors. As a matter of fact, when you look in the late 1800s, early 19th century, we had basically an agrarian society where everybody was in the outdoors. When you start looking at the urban population, you were talking about maybe 15% back in like 1918, and now it's 85%. But here's the thing. All people were outdoors. All people were engaging in the outdoors. And now we're having these campaigns to engage all people in the outdoors. So somewhere along the line, something changed. And I need you to start asking the questions while we're going through this. What changed and how can I affect it to become a little better where I see more people that don't necessarily look like me in the outdoors? So, that being said, here's a question I want to throw out to everybody. What are some of the barriers people of color face when accessing the outdoors, and different activities in the outdoors? And does living in Austin diminish or exacerbate these barriers?
So we start down here now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first off, I like to start this way. And just echo what David said about a lot more. BIPOC people have always had a connection to the land, whether that's like anything, forced or like inherent and like natural, whether that's the migrant workers in like the fields, the RTD, or whether that's like forced labor during colonialism, or like the genocide of indigenous people during like the Troubled Tears period and stuff like that. To like promote ideologies like imperialism and like manifest destiny. But there's always been that inherent connection with the land. And I'm kind of like a history like guy, even though I major in that. But like even like one of the oldest creation myths or stories, which is like Sumerian, it's called like the Hindu creation story. It's like 3,000 years old, and it kind of gives you like the bare bones of like what creation was. And guess what? It deals with the outdoors. Or whether you subscribe to like the Christian faith, it starts in the garden, which is outdoors. So we all have like this inherent like connection with nature that's always been there inside of us. But as far as barriers, there's 4 barriers that we kind of see in my organization, and I kind of ran across and kind of like played around with. I call it the picnic table method, and the reason how come it is when you go outdoors, it's always a picnic table. And whenever you see a picnic table, you want to forget this, right? So the 4 barriers to entry, the first one is the gear. It is very expensive to buy gear for the outdoors. You can get in the outdoors with any type of equipment, but gear that lasts is going to cost a lot of upfront capital. And for households that may be living a paycheck to paycheck or may not have a steady income, it's hard to buy those type of things. Like, do I buy the Osprey backpack or do I put food on the table? Hopefully put food on the table. The next one is like the knowledge gap. The knowledge to be in the outdoors is so overwhelming sometimes that a lot of people just say, all right, forget it, I don't want to be a part of this, because there's too much like knowledge in, like, okay, there's like the 10 essentials that you have to bring. There's like, okay, cool, well, I need to know how to navigate a map to be able to get on the trail. I need to know what each of these signs mean. I need to know how to read a map. So there's so many components to the knowledge aspect that go into these barriers. The third one is the social emotional side. And I mean, there's kind of like the phrase that white people stuff, but it's breaking down all the stereotypes that's typically associated with the outdoors. Like, oh, if I want to go camping, I got to go up to Colorado and be in the Rockies and stuff like that. Or if I want to go to fly fishing, I got to be in Montana in the stream in the middle of nowhere. And flights in Montana are not cheap. And again, flying fishing is not a cheap sport to get introduced to or be able to participate in general. And then the last one is kind of like a hybrid almost. It's the transportation side and also the access. They both go hand in hand because the nearest state park is like McKinney Falls, and there's no public transportation to get there. There's a lot of people trying to push the transit to trails type of legislation and stuff like that. But to get to these parks that are like public, that are resources that our kids and our people are entitled to, you have to have transportation. And then again, with Texas being 95% private, the access part comes into play. Because again, the very few places that you can rely to go on if you want to get that outdoor experience away from the city lights are going to be Texas state parks. But again, we saw in COVID, a lot of people decided to go outside and stuff like that. And again, you had an influx of people. But when you go look back on the flip side of the private side of it, is that you have to oftentimes plan your schedule around other people's schedule essentially. So it only limits about, if you have a 365-day calendar, that means that when it's said and done, you might only have 45 days that you're able to work with to try to get a year worth of programming in. So those 4 things are kind of like the barriers to entry that I see. And again, as far as Austin, I really can't attest to that because I don't really live in Austin. But the thing of it is that with Texas being so geographically big and having as many state parks as we do, which is a blessing, but a lot of them are very inaccessible to some of the people who have never been. So again, Austin is kind of also unique because there's a river, and it's very outdoorsy. I don't like to use that word, but it's an outdoorsy city essentially, and people are always trying to get outdoors. But that's not always the case for a lot of these other metropolitan cities. I mean, there are organizations that are trying to do that, but that's not always the case.
I know. That was a lot. I mean, there were so many good points that I don't know how to chime in on that, but I do have a lot to say as well, and hopefully I can narrow it down just to let you know my perspective of the barriers that has stopped a lot of Black and brown people from being outdoors. I'm a native in Austin, and I started Black Women Who in 2018. And the reason why I started Black Women Who, because at first it was called Black Women Who Kayak, before I rebranded just recently. But when I started, it was because of the fact that when I would go kayaking, I wouldn't see anyone who looked like me that was out there kayaking. We are connected to the land and to the water in such significant ways, but yet we're disconnected in a much more powerful way because of the fact that representation is lacking and it's just not there. And the thing is that COVID and unfortunately a lot of the social injustice that just recently happened during COVID has really caused some businesses and then also organizations to really start opening up their eyes and understanding why we need to start implementing more diversity and inclusiveness in their environments. And I just feel like that if, for even Austin, like, I feel like it's not only just Austin, but everywhere. As you see now on commercials, you see they have Black families who are camping. They have Black families who are hiking. That was not in 2018. You didn't see that type of representation. So the fact is that now people are starting to see themselves, they're starting to see someone who looks like them that are doing these things. And that's what's causing, I feel like that they're saying, okay, I can do that because I see someone else who looks like me doing it. But the thing is that we're still, the most significant gap here, guys, is the fact that it's great that you can see yourself in these spaces, but it's the fact of feeling welcome when you are there. That's the part that a lot of my members, you know, you can go to an establishment and you want to participate, but if you're not feeling welcome or feel like this is something that you belong in doing, why would you want to stay? Why would you want to be a part of this? And the thing is that lack of education of the fact that we are connected to this land and water, that's the part that, you know, we feel like we've been betrayed because we are very much so a part of it, but we're not feeling like we're accepted to the very thing that we are rooted in. So that's what I I'm sorry.
It's like one of those things where I'm trying to think of a reply, but I'm just like listening to you guys. That was great. Can I ask that question again?
The question is, what are some of the barriers when accessing outdoor spaces, activities, and does living in Austin diminish or exacerbate them?
Okay. I think I'll talk about something very specific. I grew up not doing a lot of stuff in the outdoors because my parents were afraid of the outdoors. I'm from North Carolina, really huge outdoor culture, and I never really got to see a lot of it until I was an adult. And the only time I could really go camping was with my church, because those are the only people my parents trusted. I think a lot of times I asked to camp, and my dad was like, "Yeah, you can camp in the garage," because that was like seen as the safest place I could somewhat be outside. And I remember just growing up, and the big thing was like, okay, you can go camp, what's gonna happen with this? My dad always talked about snakes. And it's like, yeah, snakes like us are a problem, but like it's not that. I've been camping a lot, and I've maybe seen a snake once. But as I grew up, I realized that a lot of what held my parents back and held me back from participating in outdoors was like that fear. And it's very easy, I think, to dismiss fear as something not real. But even this morning when thinking about the questions, one of my fears is like, oh, well, I can't be completely honest because it will make people uncomfortable. And so in that sense, like fear becomes an actual barrier, like a physical barrier to participation, to expression, to really openness. And so I think a lot of what, as I started to I would say moving to Austin really changed the way I related with the outdoors. Because there's so many opportunities and because everyone's outside constantly, it feels something that's very accessible. But like Tanya talked about, it's like, do I feel welcome in those spaces? And I'll be honest, no, the answer was no, like a really big no. There are things that I still do in this city, and the only reason I do it was because I showed up to something and one person spoke to me. And because of like that, I've remained very loyal to those like activities. And it's one of those things where like I wanted to participate, someone reached out and made me feel welcome and safe, and then I latched onto that. And so even with something like, okay, it's awesome accessible. I think with cycling it's weird because unless you're a road cyclist, it's really hard to ride around and feel safe around vehicles because we all know, I'm sure we all heard a lot about how actually unsafe it is maybe to run outside of the city center as a cyclist. There were quite a few recent crashes of like low-end cyclists in the area. people that are like known to be safe and good and strong cyclists. So a lot of what it takes is to ride out of the city. And a lot of the cities, as you ride out of Austin, oddly all have Confederate monuments in their downtown, which is very difficult when you're a person of color. It's one of those things where it's like you go there and you're like, okay, this may not be totally relevant, but it's still that fear that is actually real, and it feels real. And so I do a lot of riding by myself. That's kind of self-imposed. I use it as a way to kind of get away from people since I do like 5 different jobs. But it's one of those things that like I have to acknowledge that as I'm riding through rural Texas by myself, it's like, is my phone working? Do people know where I'm at? Am I gonna be able to get out of this situation in a really quick way? And I ride by myself because I can rely on myself, and I've ridden with other people. They're not all white, but they're people that make questionable decisions and at times put their own safety on the line. Because they're like, oh, I ran out of water because I didn't think about filling up water bottles. And it's like, cool, we all make mistakes. Here's some of my water, and then I'm giving away something that makes me safe. And then it's like, okay, there's one experience I'm thinking about. This guy, he was riding with me and my other friend who's an ex-kid, and we were both riding. We're riding, we have all the water we need. And he's like, oh, I don't have water, why don't we stop at this house? And we're like, this house? And like, I swear to God, I was like, this house? And I point, and there's a sign that says, visitors are welcome to leave as soon as they arrive. And I was like, oh, you want to get water at this house, dude? And before we could say anything, he just like rolled into the yard, into the driveway. And so at this point, me and my friend are looking at each other, and we're just like, okay, we're gonna stay on the street. And so we did for a while. The guy's, pretty cordial, welcomed us in, gave us water. But like in that instance, I realized that I have to do things a very different way. And maybe I don't have to, but it feels very much like the only way I can engage in this is to do it a very specific way that separates me from people and also puts all of the pressure of being safe squarely on my shoulders. So if something goes wrong, it's a monument of value. It feels like. So. Oh yeah, some of the bears. And so I think that one of the bears I would just say is like that possibly irrational fear of going into the outdoors and being like by yourself and thinking about all the horrors that you've seen, in movies or read in books, or even your parents have told you about. And it all becomes real when you're out there. And so I think about that a lot.
So right before Josie answers, one of the things I encourage you all to do, go out on the internet. There is a study called Nature of America. And there's some really good feedback from different ethnic groups that I think will be of interest to you. But one of the things that was talked about, especially among Black, Brown, and some of the Asian groups, was the fear wasn't of the things that are in nature, it was who's in nature. So just something to think about.
For me, I've realized that our communities are battling so much more, right? So it's kind of like, this is the last thing that they're thinking of is, let me take my family camping when they don't have a family. So, or you're seeing so many kids being raised by their grandparents, by their uncles, by someone else. So those are hard issues, kids committing suicide, depression. So for me, I think that's a huge battle, and that's definitely something that I've seen a lot of in the community that I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to reach families, first-time families, second-time families, kids that have never gone. So for me, I'm in the community, talking to the schools, going to any organizations that partner with kids in these communities. That's where I'm at. That's where you'll find me. Because to me, I'm also I love to connect families together. So for me, whether that's your uncle, whether that's your aunt, and I feel like the best connection that you can make is in a Texas State Park, which I love it because David Buggs told me years ago. He says, if you have any issues, if any of your families have any issues, to me and to Alex from Black Guides, he's like, you let me know, I will handle it. Knowing that Texas Parks has our back, it's huge. So for me, and that's why I've always I love the camping experiences because sometimes you might not get them back. So if I can give them so much more in one weekend and our leaders. I mean, it's for me, that's what I love to do. But that's a fear, I think, that we have, me, of the families, and that we have so many other things going on. And then also not seeing each other, not seeing us on magazines, not seeing us on TV screens, not seeing us in movies. I thought camping wasn't for me. And I asked my dad, I said, you were a migrant worker, but you never took me outside. He said, you played outside. You had, I bought you a horse. He's like, I was like, he was on sale, by the way. I didn't say to my grandpa's yard. It was crazy. I think I rode it once. But he was like, yeah, he was like, and we took you to Disneyland. I was like, he's like, that was a park. I was like, yeah, but that wasn't a park, So, but then again, he was like, I just didn't know. I thought back in the 70s you were getting me outside, and it was true. So I got to have fun at Disneyland, and now I'm like, okay, but now I understand that I feel like, especially at this time, we need the outdoors so much more. So the kids do too.
So I'm going to stay with you, Josie. So next question. In your opinion, what unique opportunities can nature offer BIPOC folks specifically? And how does your heritage as a Latina influence your own relationship with nature?
Oh gosh, just grounding myself back to nature. So recently I went to Devil's River State Park, which not very many people go there. I got to see Golden Falls. Super excited about that. I was excited about that. But realizing that there's so many plants out there, so much medicinal things that I grew up with, that I saw. One of the things that they pointed out was this thing called sangre de chango. It was everywhere, and a lot of people don't know sangre de chango used to come in this little bottled glass jar, and it's iodine basically. So you got to cut, you do anything, everybody had red. You knew that you cut yourself, you got that sangre de chango, you knew that you were going to get it from your grandma or your mom. So it was great to see the plant, and I never knew that. And then just different things that we are so connected to with the land, because my grandmother did so much of that. I remember she had a garden, you could go outside, everything had a purpose, right? Her roses were, she would trim them, and I'd always see, why do you have roses in a glass, after they fell off? And she'd be like, well, that's for my hair, And so just different things that I connected to in nature, and I'm learning so much more about things that can be useful. And I was like, oh my gosh, we used to do that, that's right, because it's been so long. But I think just realizing that there's so much more of me and our community and my culture there, that has really surprised me even more so. So yeah, so and of course I'm always looking to see what I can eat to parks. Because I'm like, I remember that. I'm like finding certain things, and I was like, they're like, yeah, they used to do this to do lemonade, or they used to do this, and so I love looking for fruits and foods and that I can tie in and some, yeah. So.
Sangre de chango.
Sangre de chango. Monkey blood.
Sangre
de chango.
That's what it
Monkey
translates.
blood.
Monkey blood.
Every Latino household had a sangre de chango. Yeah.
My household, it was because of blood.
And then the aloe vera plant was always up in the front of the Latino family, because whenever you had a burn, that's what you go get this, get the aloe vera, So besides the huevo, which everybody I think has heard about the huevo, so that's a whole different story.
So just talking about that, engaging in nature. So Thurman, this is for you. So what does BIPOC leadership in nature look like to you?
Okay, I'll start this way. I was a private school kid, and if you couldn't tell, no matter what it was, yeah, it wasn't a deep cut, okay? Call a spade, right? But for me, in my story, in navigating the outdoors, I was in spaces that were predominantly white. And if I wanted to hang out with my friends, I would have to do the things that they wanted to do. So if they wanted to go fishing, I was on YouTube the night before, how to use a bait caster, how to use a lure, how to rig up a jig in order to fish, because I was one of the very few black kids there. So I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what I was doing, so that there was no one that would ever say oh, he didn't know he was doing. Oh, of course he didn't know he was doing. He doesn't go outside like that. So there was countless of hours where I was on YouTube just searching and stuff like that. And so to today, my algorithm is very much outdoorsy because of my searching. But that's how I got into the outdoors. But it wasn't people that looked like me. But nowadays, I get to take out kids that look like me, and to be able to provide an environment to where they can like fail with grace and also be corrected with love, which isn't something that is generally done, but by being able to do that, it almost instills like this like surrogate family ties essentially. Like for example, we have camp called Camp Founder Girls. It's for black girls all over the US and stuff like that. And they call me Uncle Thurman. Granted, I'm not close to any uncle status, but they call me Uncle Thurman. But it's because of over the years, I've kind of built that trust capital with them, which allows them to see and accept like the wisdom that I have, to essentially be able to, okay, this is somebody that I can trust. So that's what it looks like. Being a BIPOC leader in nature is holistic. It's intentional, and it's super hard, very hard sometimes, because there is that trust capital that you have to build in. But at the same time too, you're doing life with kids in ways that they might or may not have somebody to do life with. But even if they do have it, you're 1+1, or you're that first person that they can start to be able to do those things with. So, I mean, I think that's kind of like what it looks like qualitatively. I can't put it quantitatively what it looks like and tell you this is the step by step, but it happens organically and it happens like naturally. And so anytime we have an event, it feels like a family reunion because we're all together joking around and like, yeah. So I think that's kind of answer that question.
Super. So I'm going to switch this a little bit because we're talking about engaging folks in the outdoors and leading organizations that are getting BIPOC folks outdoors. But I want to look at a little different perspective. So Tanya, as a female of color, what are some of the common misconceptions you've encountered about females of color in the outdoors? And what is black women who are doing to kind of counter some of those misconceptions?
That is a really good question, I would say. There's a ton of misconceptions about black and brown women, and one of the ones that I feel like I deal with is the fact that we don't know how to swim. So the reason why we don't participate in water events is, the fact that it's because of our hair. We don't want to mess up our hair, and then not knowing how to swim. So for me, one of the things, or a couple of the things that I had to do was with Black Women Who is to start to look at those barriers and see how I can actually start to dissect them. And to me, it felt like, I used a metaphor, it was like peeling an onion, basically, because it's so many layers to the barriers that it stops Black and brown women from doing certain things like water events or hiking events. But those misconceptions it's a myth. It's been a wave of women who have gone natural now, and a lot of that I feel like has to do with COVID. But I feel like that has promoted a lot of women to also start to, allow themselves to get outside and do these things like going hiking. But one of the things we also did was we partnered with the British Swim School to offer swimming lessons. So that was us trying to break down that barrier of not, women who didn't know how to swim. Now we have over 50 ladies and their kiddos who are now learning how to swim for the very first time. Just like Truman has said, as far as the hiking gear and doing some of the things that, being in nature, we partnered with REI to help give discounts and educating, because it's so important. That lack of education about nature and what to expect is so important that you know, we partner with a lot of organizations to help make this nature just feel more welcoming and allow women in their kiddos to actually feel like as if, you know, they do belong to these spaces just like anybody else.
And thank you for that, Tanya. So I'm going to throw another question out, and I'm going to direct it to Ariel, but really anybody can chime in on this question. It says, how can non-BIPOC folks, and does everybody know what BIPOC means? Are you telling the truth? Because you know, I've gone places and I'll say something and folks will go, yeah, and they have no clue. But BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. Okay, all right, just want to make sure. All right, so the question is, what can non-BIPOC folks in the outdoor industry be, how can they be better allies for folks of color?
Okay, I guess one of the first things I thought about as Tanya was speaking was, I think that when we go into the outdoors, because most of us want to be very helpful when we're bringing new people in, we try to teach them the way it is done. And that's like through a big process of, you know, it's a big personal process of being like, okay, this is the gear I need, this is the setup I need, this is the way I want it to look. And there are standards to this. There are ways in which it makes it easier for you to participate in the outdoors. But the truth is that there is like not a singular or even two right ways to go outside. If you have a desire to go outside, you can have an ability to do it in a way that fits who you are and how you want to engage with it. And so I do a lot of bike packing trips, and bike packing is, it's like backpacking, except that you ride a bicycle and it carries all your stuff so your back doesn't get destroyed. And it's become something that I really gotten into in the past year and a half. One with my job, but it was kind of something that I saw maybe like 2 years ago and really wanted to take part of. I'm very fortunate I get to do it a lot. But when we have intro trips, we do, this past year, I'm saying this past year we're going to revamp our system, but we did like 101 to 401 and kind of just used the traditional college grading. But our 101 trips were 20-mile totals, and we would bike to McKinney Falls. And I would tell people, it's like, hey, it's 10 miles, there's 3 hills, and then we'll go get water. And that's like, we would tell people that, and I can't tell you the amount of stuff that people bring on these trips. Or like, I'm always like, I send them an email and I'm like, hey, if you have questions, come talk to me. I promise I'm nice. I don't really want to work anyway, so I'll talk to you. And we'll have, but then like, it's always the same thing. I show up 2 hours early before a ride to be there before anyone arrives. Everyone shows up 30 minutes before we go, and everyone needs help because it's the first trip, and everyone's gear all looks different. And I think there are a lot of times where I want to slap at like the ingenious way people have strapped things to their bikes. Because it's really amazing, and it's like, I'm glad you got that here, but now we have to bike 10 miles. Honestly, it's not going to work. But a lot of it's like doing it without shaming the person for the gear that they have or the way in which they attach it to their bike. And I have a very specific example of 2 women of color who showed up to a ride. Their gear was all over the place, and it was one of those things where they showed up very last minute. And my first instinct was to be like, oh God, I just want to go and ride my bike. But as like, and I think we all know this, as a leader, you kind of set the energy for how people interact with other people. And so the goal is, especially with, and I do this very intentionally, especially with people of color, is like, I'm overly patient. I ask probably too many questions. But it's a way, I try to find a way to make their gear and the way that they have set their bike up work. And I might say, hey, maybe you just need to strap this down tight. Or hey, let me go get this thing that will make it easier, and I'll give you 50% off. You know what, I'll put it on my ticket because it's $5, and my boss doesn't check my ticket, which is very nice. But I think that's one of the big ways is like, as a non-BIPOC person, as an ally, we can find ways to make people feel good about learning how to have their gear done. Or, you know, we can also be flexible in what we think is the right way to do things. I'll say because being in the outdoors is very white facing. And we all do the things that the cool white people on the internet do. And there might be, the occasional black person that's cool, has a sick packed up rig. But if you go to talk to them, a lot of them, and I've been very fortunate to recently start racing and doing bike pack racing and stuff like that. So I've got to meet a lot of people I've seen on Instagram, which is tight. And I got to meet them. And it's so cool because when you talk to them about their gear, they're like, oh yeah, my sponsor said I needed this, but like, I did this anyway, and they're gonna have to deal with it, and I just can't take pictures of my bike. And so it's because at that point you're like, okay, like it's very personal, and like the way in which you have to get through one of those events and stuff, it challenges who you are as a person. And so you really need to be able to lean on yourself and lean on the things that you've done to get yourself there. And so I think that as we engage with people in the outdoors, and we can remember that we can't start off by telling them that they messed up, that they did it wrong. And then I wrote something about support things. Oh, show up to stuff. Like, I have a lot of, anyway, I'm not gonna go that way. I have a team called the Bottom Bracket Boys. We're a black focused team, like black and black identified cyclists. We hold 2 rides a month. One is a pure, only for black and black identified cyclists. And we wanted to hold 2 a month, and it was kind of like, okay, well, it kind of just ended up being the same thing and the same people. And we had some people ask if they could come on the ride or if they could bring people. And so we decided to do a Friends and Allies ride, and it's been really cool because the support that we've received in the community has been like immense. And so it's allowed us not only to have more people on rides, have more connections, have more fun. Rides are always more fun when there's more than just the 3 people on the team. And it's really allowed us to grow. A lot of people, non-black people, have come on our rides and brought their friends, or they went on a ride, had a lot of fun, told a black friend about it, who then came on the next ride, that I accidentally canceled because the weather looked bad, but I got to meet them and talk about it. And so yeah, I think that last thing is like supporting stuff. Like if your black friends are doing something, I know that Austin is ridiculous with how much is going on. But it's important to show up to those things. And I will say I have been critical of my friends in the past. I'm not doing it. But it's not life or death, but it does mean a lot. It does mean a lot. I think when friends are able to do it. And I'm very fortunate that my friends in the front row show up to the stuff that I show up, that I do, even though they know I don't like to be looked at. And so yeah. Anybody else on that?
Yeah, anybody else want to answer that question?
I want to say, only because of the fact that I'm a part of a couple of the DEI conferences that I've attended in organizations. One of the things that have always came up was the fact that, when you do see black or brown people in spaces that you typically don't see them in, is to make them feel welcome. But not to, and this is a tricky situation for everybody because, you don't know what to do, or sometimes you don't know what to say and stuff like that. But not to make yourself look strange or weird or anything like that. But not to ask them, don't ask them do they belong here, but, or are they lost? But to ask them if you could help them, maybe, I feel like just being observative of the situation, of the environment and stuff, and they might tell you they do need help, but I feel like just making yourself feel welcome in that time, in that space is very helpful.
Okay, so what I'm about to say might be a little controversial, so let's all take a deep breath in. Go ahead, inhale, and exhale, okay? It's 2023, almost about to be 2024, okay? We have to position ourselves to stop thinking about allyship, because we don't need any more allies. We need people that's gonna be accomplices. We got stuff that needs to get done, and we need people that's gonna be there. And oftentimes, to me, and I'll say it to me, I learned that through therapy. To me, it often feels that allyship is one step removed. It's like you live in the suburbs, but you never come inside the city. Which is a problem, right? We need allies that's go live inside the city, right? Especially today when we have an actual war of erasing BIPOC history from schools, from textbooks, and just from like the fabric of this country. So we need accomplices. The mindset of solidarity and praising like BIPOC organizations, like that's great, but we need to take it a step further, because if we really want to see change, like we need those people to have control and then access to be able to almost essentially backdoor the system to let us in. Accomplices don't care who's in charge, and they don't care about the credit. They want to make sure that the job gets done. And if you want to look at it this way, all accomplices are allies, not all allies are accomplices. So we have to change the dynamic in the way that we think about it to, again, like, and it's a real question to think about this, but like, what are you willing to give up in order to see a fair and just world? Now, when you really think about that, that is a very, very dark and deep question. Because some people, it might be losing their job. Some people, it might mean I'm about to just like, I inherited all this money, I'm not gonna give it to I'm not gonna spend it, I'm gonna donate it to organizations, or do something with it that's good, or that's addressing the history of like your family, or correcting family members that might be grew up in like the 60s and the 50s at Thanksgiving, and you're like, oh, that's just Uncle Jeff, he just says that, or Grandpa Lou, he just does that. But like really standing up and being like, hey, we don't do that. So I think we have to switch the narrative of being an ally to being an accomplice, because accomplices get shit done. Get stuff done. But yeah.
And for me, I just feel that, I'm not looking for Latino, all Latino organizations. I don't work with them all. I'm not looking to see who's doing, there's so many people out there. So for me, I'm looking for that special place with special people that I can connect. To me, if we make that connection, there's something that you can bring to me and you say, you know what, Josie, we've got this great space and it's got this, and I can feel that it's very, culture related. I can bring my community and have them feel great and comfortable there. It's something that we can share. And if it's got something that, to me, it's just that connection. So, reach out. Like, that's all I'm looking for. Just somebody to say, hey, I saw your organization, I read about it, I feel that maybe, we've got this that might align with you. Feel free. If you see us at the parks, we have our flag out all the time, and we always have the Rangers coming up. I'm usually letting them know I'm there also. Like, ahead of time, I'm like, hey, Latino Doors is coming. Like, we're going to be here. We have 70 people coming, like all our leaders, and they know it. I'm like, hi, I'm from Latino Outdoors. And so it's cute because they get excited and they're like, oh, okay. So I think it also helps them to know that we're coming. But for me, as long as you come with your true authentic self, and really wanting to really help and be there, it's going to come through. And then that's how we can kind of start that partnership. And I also know our community needs that, and they're not going to trust somebody that maybe doesn't look like them, which is why we're here. So I feel like we're here to make that difference and also be that door for you. Because if they trust me and I trust you, they're going to trust you. So we have to start somewhere, right? So I feel like it.